Okay, so here's my take on being invited at this very early stage in commercial virtual reality to talk about whether we should worry about whether it's going to be used for torture or not. So I think, and I think that there's been a lot of anxiety expressed today. It's been of three types, and I'm going to offer you the solution for all of them. Some of them you've already found. So one is journalism ethics types problems. One of them is verification problems. How will we know that it's the difference between the Drudge Report and the New York Times? You know, how will we know if we're being deceived? But the main one that people have been expressing is how will we know representation from reality? And this is an old one, and people have already been talking about it. And there is a solution for this one. But I believe, as an interaction designer with a background in literature and in media, that this is a design problem and that it's solved over longer periods of time. So one of the first expressions in the modern world of a new medium scaring people that we're going to be deluded is Don Quixote in 1605, a little over 100 years after the invention of the printing press. And he's solitarily reading. All of a sudden, there's all of these romance quest stories available, and he's going to go nuts, right? He won't know the difference. Next thing, tilting at windmills. It's very similar to what people have been saying about you're going to be in there, and then you're going to come out, and you won't know the difference, right? And then several people have already mentioned this, our old favorite, the Sea of cinema education, the Sea of Train, where this didn't actually happen, but it expresses our wonder, as Kara pointed out, at this just a new medium that can represent the world in a new way. So it's the world's first documentary, right? And supposedly the Parisians went fleeing from the cafe. And then I could do, an hour on these, but remember how comic books, when people were consuming a lot of them because after the war they became more popular in the 1950s, and there was this real fear that children's minds were being warped by them. Now there were also fears that the cultural content was repulsive, but those are the same fears of any medium, right? So that's when Nani says, well, how do I address this problem? Well, I apply journalistic ethics, right? That's the same thing but when a new medium comes, we get scared all over again. And because our human power of representation is just so powerful, it freaks us out that it's going, we've just become aware of it anew. Television. And I was looking for a good example of people being afraid of television, and then I just, from our old friend Google, I was reminded of the fear that there was subliminal messages in television. I don't know if other people are old enough to remember that. And actually, I think it popped up again. There's some people on Quora, which you think is an educated audience, although they're all in Silicon Valley, so they have these very odd, narrow educations, and they're waiting for the singularity, so who knows what's in their mind. But the people are still saying, how do I know when there's a subliminal message in the TV? And it's just the pervasiveness of the media that is a new experience. And we have responded to these things with media literacy, right? And so that is really the answer here as well. And I won't even go into video games because, okay. So now we've got this imagined transporting experience that is appealing to us, and that some of us have gotten used to from being in these world-class toy shops. I was at MIT for 25 years, and now I've been at Georgia Tech for 16 years. So I have gotten nauseous many times before. But as a general phenomenon, it's new. And it is striking even to me that people can now put on these incredibly uncomfortable headsets and sort of forget how uncomfortable they are because you get these beautiful images and you can move around in them. And then these ridiculous claims are made for them, but it is a good tool for getting the attention of the jaded, over-rich people in Davos, for instance, right? I mean, and there is something very satisfying about this picture because you want to rub their faces in the results of their decision making. But this is not going to last. I mean, and if you read the commentary on some of these, I mean, it's great that people make these. And known is a wonderful, and Chris Mills exists, and maybe helped raise some money, but it was a substitute for having Sting there that year, right? That's if you read Gabby's description, and so it won't work 3 years in a row, you know, so. So we look at this, and it's just so new, and the novelty is it works. And then we ask these outlandish questions. So I would like to try to bring, without damaging the excitement, I would like to bring our expectations down to scale. The platforms are still in the experimental stage, and God knows if any of them will make money. And all that money that's been invested and promised could disappear tomorrow if people decide there's just not enough return on investment, or somebody invents something else that tickles you from Hong Kong or something, right? So. And that doesn't mean that the technology isn't, that the medium isn't real, because in the long run, I wrote a book, Hamlet on the Holodeck. I'm down with it. And I'm thrilled that there's a community of practice has been convened by all this money that's been thrown around to make stuff that mostly sucks, but that you can learn from. Right? Right, which is what Elena is saying. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know whether you're applauding the sucking or the learning. Okay. So, why is there not a picture on this slide? A novel. Oh, I've lost. Why did I lose the picture? You see, technology is totally unreliable. Okay, so I will tell you what's on this. Oh, I'm sure it's Bill Gates' fault. When people do, if you would look up virtually better, you've got your phones, you'll see that we have experience with VR for therapeutic uses, and what works is not the real. It's wrong to think that this is reality, or that it is. And in fact, what immerses people so that they can get over their fear of heights, for instance, or their PTSD from being in a war situation, is to make it not completely real. So it has to be reassuringly unreal enough that they can surrender to it. And then they can act within it and feel that immersion. Okay. So here's a picture that should be here. That if, and so imagine, if you will, I have seen technology fail in this room so many times that it doesn't faze me at all. The walk. So it's a picture of the photorealism of that VR environment, where you mirror the walk of the lunatic who went between the twin towers, right? So, and now you do it and what happens if you look at the YouTube videos, that there are at least two, because I went back to look for the one I wanted and I couldn't find it, but I found another one where the person falls. We have to go faster, I'm almost done. And and so if you don't give people the fourth wall, if you make it too realistic, they don't become confident until they grab an arm, until they fall. So it's up to the designer to make the conventions that make for the fourth wall. Okay, this is a picture of my second book, which is Inventing the Medium. And this is my main point, that we're all engaged in this collective process of exploring these affordances, and that what we have to do is look for what are the coherent conventions, and those establish the fourth wall. So when we know what we can do in environment, then we are at ease. And games offer a rich palette of this. So I hate to say this to people with a background in film, but it really is not a filmic medium, although it can, film is one of the contributors. It is a interactive medium, and if there isn't interaction, you're not using the digital. That is what is if we're in a space that's defined by bits, we want to do something, we want it to respond to us. So the direction is clear, that we will get someday to something like a holodeck, but you can't tell what the pace is. And this is my final slide. But the thing that will bring it is the collective activity of inventing that fourth wall. That, when we invent the conventions, then when we're on the World Wide Web, we can tell the difference, it turns out, between the New York Times and the Drudge Report. But people got very scared about this because it was new. And we do know when we're in a movie, we can surrender to it. We don't think that something is coming at us, but we can pretend that we're there because we know we're in the movie. And when we have that reassurance that there is a wall there that we can get out of, that is when we can have that alignment of sympathy that Dan was talking about that builds up empathy. Because you don't get empathy just by putting on a helmet and looking at another person. You get empathy by being in a structured story environment, which you can only surrender to when we built up those structures of coherence. Thank you.
Wonderful.